Yeah, question. Go ahead.
Two-part question. With the assignments, for example, the row highlighter, are we able to submit it multiple times?
The question is, with the assignments like the row highlighter, should you be able to submit multiple times? And the answer is, I think on all the homeworks, I'm allowing 2 submissions. So do the first submission, and if you get less than full credit, take the feedback and do some more correcting. And then you get the average of those 2 scores, I think.
So if you submit it like more than twice, it'll let you submit it more than twice?
I think it will let you submit it as many times as you darn well please. Your score will be determined by your first 2 submissions. So the idea is, you got to take it seriously the first time because you don't have as many cracks as you want. But if you still have work to do after that second submission and you want to figure it out, it stays open to continue to give you feedback.
Is that the same for the projects?
Projects is where you're showing me what you got. And so you get 1 submission that counts for the projects. I think the project will probably still let you submit more times, but your score is going to be your first submission.
On the Fallen Angel project, does the grader put the cursor in the right spot before it runs?
The question is, does the grader put the cursor in the right spot before it runs on the Fallen Angel grader? And the answer is no. You better do that yourself. So yeah, if you need that cursor to be somewhere when it runs, it's just going to run your code and do it. Okay. Ooh, other questions on that Fallen Angel project? How many of you have finished the Fallen Angel project already? How many of you are thinking, it's not due till Saturday, why would I have started it yet? There's a few of you like that too, okay. All right. Other questions? Okay, so for today's class, you'll need to download this file, census.xls. So typically we work with XLSM files. What is an X for full credit for class? Whoa. What? What is, let me ask the question. You get the first shot. So what's the difference between an XLSM and an XLS workbook? Well, that's like half credit for class. Did you need half? Were you already halfway there?
I don't know, one day you said like full participation, but then like you didn't let me answer the question like halfway through. You like.
Oh, really?
I don't know if I already got it.
That's probably both. You probably have 2 halves now. Submit while you can. All right. Anyone else want to take a stab at that? What's an XLS? What's an XLS file? Yep, last one.
Like an older version.
Yeah, it's an older version. Yeah, just before 2007. So that means I've been using the same example since before 2007. Actually, since way before 2007. It's a pretty good example. Okay. So go ahead and download that workbook. But then ultimately, when you go to save it, you'll want to save it as an XLSM. All right. I think I have it open already. Okay. So here is, in fact, I'll go ahead and save it right now. File save. I'll put it in my downloads. And I'll make it an XLSM. It would continue to work as an XLS file, but might as well bring it up to speed. And what are we? Winter of 16. All right. If someone can tell me, give me something, say something intelligent about this data. I mean, it's pretty bad looking data, but tell me, what is this data? What might we use it for? Give me some feeling for that. I'm handing out credit liberally on these questions today. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Is it census data?
It is census data, but you extracted that from the file name. I need a little more, for.
Well, they've got ages there in the middle. Looks like this is the word age.
Age. Yeah, not enough. Not enough. Look, there's more tabs than just this first one. We'll go here and then we'll go here.
Yeah, so it's organized in kind of like a database format. So if we wanted to like work with the data, we can put it in a table or we can put it in a pivot table and summarize the data pretty easily.
Okay, so you're just kind of telling me, how can I work with any data that's in a table? But I want to know about this data. It is census data, but I want more specifics. The information's here. Go ahead.
Or the population count by county.
Population count by county. All right. So that's full credit for class participation. That was something that was really enlightening about this data. I mean, right now it's a bunch of numbers. But now if you tell me this has something to do with counties, in fact, we can come over here and look at the county names, and we can see the names of all the counties that we have data for. Okay, so this is county level data. That was interesting. That enlightened me about this data. We'll take a couple more. There's more to be said about it.
The second tab has codes so that we can interpret what's on the first tab.
Okay, if you can help me interpret something, help me. Okay, so let's do this. Tell me what can you tell me what this column of data is, this column right here is?
PSTO for population, that's resident total population estimate from July 1st, 2008.
Whoa, say that again? It was, so basically what you said is that you look at this number here, match it up to the data set along this top row, and then back to the data dictionary. That will tell you what that column, what numbers those are.
Including how it's reported, so there's not its absolute value, percent, whatever.
Yeah, absolute value, percentage, very good. So this is all information about the columns. The county names is information about the rows. And so, let's see. What county is Charleston in? Allison. You're from Charleston. If you don't know what county it's in, we'll think less of you. What county is Beaufort in?
Beaufort's in
Beaufort
Beaufort County.
County.
South Carolina.
How do you spell it? B-E-A-U-F?
F-O-R-T.
B-E-A-U-F-O-R-T? Maybe I'm looking for the whole cell. I don't know. Match entire constant. You had just invented that. There's no such place. I don't know where you're really from, but it's not there. Oh, I'm on the wrong page. Never mind. I'm on the wrong page. There we go. North Carolina.
There's a Beaufort.
There we go. So Beaufort County, South Carolina. So it turns out that county number 45013 is that county. So we come over here and we find 45013. Hey, Numlock, where'd you go? 45013. And then this should be information about, how do you say it? Beaufort? Beaufort County, South Carolina. So if we were then to look up at the cost, so if we looked at this number right here, 29,000, basically 500. What does that mean if we go up to column E? That means 208, oh, I forgot which one it was. Anyway, it's one of these numbers. Is this data easy to work with? It's a nightmare. You know, thanks to the United States government for providing this data that's next to impossible to work with. Okay. So, but the nice thing about that is that we can use our skills in VBA to make this data delightful to work with. And it won't take us more than about an hour and 12 minutes. Hour and 5, when do we get out of this class? Quarter after? I've got an hour and 6 minutes to make it happen. All right, so let's take a look. What else do we have here? Some data flags. I think these are like notes about the data. They're almost all 0. Occasionally they have a 1 and it means something. It could be that thing's not available or it's suppressed to avoid disclosure of confidential information. I wonder what that is. I don't know. Footnotes, foot text. Okay, most of these others are not so interesting. And this is just a data set that I downloaded from census.gov. Speaking of .gov, my name got a lot more popular when the internet came around. But in fact, this reminds me that there is a Gov County, Kansas. This is the very county that I was named after. Well, not me. I was named after my grandfather, who was named after his something or other. Ultimately, was named after Gov County, Kansas. So that's my favorite line in this entire data set. So here's what I'd like to do today. I would like to be able to create a new tab that allows me just to look at, and I don't want to look at all this data. You know, I might want to look at the data for 1 or 2 counties and compare those side by side. So, big scale, we're going to make a new sheet, and then we're going to give the user the ability to choose a county and then display the information for that county, and then even be able to display 2 counties or 3 or 4 counties side by side. I want to compare 3 or 4 counties in South Carolina, see how they match up. I want to be able to facilitate that for the user. Are you ready to do it? Let's do it. We'll start by making a new sheet. We're not going to record ourselves making a new sheet. Let's just make a new sheet. And I'm going to put it on the very first position, just so I remember it's all the way here at the left. And why don't I call this summary? And I'll call it comparison. The idea is we'll compare more than one county. Comparison. Okay, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to start off by saying, when I look at this data set, oh, this is terrible. I don't want to have to go by the column names. I want to be able to see the data lined up by the labels for those data. And so I'm going to let's come to the data dictionary, and let's just copy column B. I'm just going to copy column B out of the data dictionary and bring it back to the comparison sheet, and I'm going to paste it right here. So this is going to be the foundation. So we've got the labels for what all these data are, and then I want to bring in the data for each one of these different counties right here. See, I don't really need this to say item description up here in cell A, so I'm going to delete that. So now I've got the values for all of the data values that we're going to show here. I've got the labels showing here. Next, I need some way to let the user pick which county they're interested in. So how should I do that? Any thoughts? We have any Excel wizards here who are saying, "Oh yeah, I know how to pick a county." There's like 3,000 of them. You got to pick from a long list.
Could you do like a button that prompts input box or an input box?
Okay, so we could put a button on this form that prompts for an input box, and the user could then just kind of type in the county that they're interested in. There's a couple problems with that. One, they're not going to type it right, and so we're going to have to kind of guess at what they really meant. And we could do that, but that's a lot more work than I want to do. We'll come here and then here.
You do a data validation drop-down list.
Okay, so there's a thing called a data validation. And let's just take a quick look at the data validation approach. So data validation is here on the data tab, and somewhere around here there's something called a validation. Isn't it over here somewhere? I don't remember where it is. It's like my screen is too small. Right. Ding. Oh, down. Is that it? Oh, data validation. How come my screen doesn't look normal? It's just because my resolution is too low or something. Whew, data validation. I've done data validation 1 or 2 times. I can't remember how to do it. So I guess I'll select that. Oh, here we go. So I clicked on the data validation, and by default, we're allowing any value. I don't want any value. I want to pick a value out of a list. And great, now what's going to be the source of the list? Then for that, I would come over here and pick the names, come over to my county names, and just pick this over here in column D. We're not going to do this, so I'm not going to take them all, but let me just bring in the first 50 or so. The source list must be a delimited list. Yeah, we're not doing this approach anyway. So I wonder why that's not working. That's all right. So what that would do is that would say, listen, there's only certain values that are allowed to go in here, and they're defined by the list. The nice thing about it is it gives me a drop-down arrow to where I can pick from the list. The sad thing about that is that all it does is it puts the name there. And so if the user chose it that way, we'd still have to kind of go back and look up that name, and we could make it work without too much trouble, but I think there's a better approach. There was another comment up here. Was that the same thing? Same thing? All right. So the other way that we're going to do is going to be on the Developer tab. We're going to come to this toolbox, and we're going to bring in a combo box. So the combo box is this little guy right here. So I'm on the Developer tab. I've got the little toolbox here, and it's not the first one. That's just a command button. It's the next one over. So I'll select that tool, and then I will click and drag to create the size of that combo box. And this will just be a drop-down list. But instead of being inside of a cell, it's in a control that sits on top of, it kind of sits above the worksheet. All right, with that there, we can right-click it and configure it. So we'll right-click and choose Format Control. All right, so the first thing we need is an input range. So this is going to be the range that says where do the values for this list come from. And we're going to go pull those off of, what is it, column C or D from the county names. Let's go take a look. So I'll come over here to county names, and I'm going to take all of these. I'll just hold the shift key down and hit Control End. That should highlight that whole row. There's 3,196. Oh, there was a lot. And hit Enter. We doing okay, folks? You're with me? Now, the next field here is the cell link. So at this point, we've just said, how are we going to get the values into the list? Now we have to say, when the user chooses one of the values, where is this combo box going to communicate that to the user which one they've selected. And so we've got to pick a cell where we want the value of the selected item to go. So I'll select that, and I think I'm going to put this, I'll just put it right here in A2. And then the drop-down lines just say, when they drop this list down, how many do we want to show? I don't know, maybe 20. Ooh, you can have 3D shading. Now I'll leave it off. And we'll say OK. Now, before I can start using this thing, I have to click off of it. So right now it's kind of in edit mode, but I click off of it, and now that drop-down list should have all those values in it. Apparently I made it way wider than it needed to be. And I think if we start typing, oh pity. If we start typing, it doesn't take us right to that area. Oh well. But we should be able to scroll down here and find a particular one that we're after. And you'll notice that when I choose Eddie, North Dakota, anyone from Eddie, North Dakota, that would be full class participation credit. If you happen to be from Eddie. No one, pity. All right, and so it puts here 2039. Any ideas what 2039 is? I'll give you full credit if you get this one.
It's the number in the listing that it is.
That's exactly right. That is the number in the list. So I scrolled all the way down to the 2039th entry in that list. Be sure to record full credit. By the way, where do you record your full credit? Do you email me with full credit? No. You go to Learning Suite and you find the assignment for full credit and you put your little comment in there. The one thing that folks often think is that this number is a reference to the row number from where the list came from. It's not. It's the order in which it appears inside the dropdown. It turns out they're the same in this case because my county names actually start on row 1. So row number 1 is the first entry in the list. But if this list started lower on the page, it would still start with 1 because it goes by the order in the list.
Is that one base or zero base?
So the question is it a 1-based set or a 0-based set? And the answer is it's a 1-based set. So that means it starts counting at 1. In computer programming stuff, a lot of times things start counting at 0, which always seems strange to me, but that's the way it is. So if we check the very first one, incidentally, if this is county data, it would be full credit for class participation if someone can tell me why all the United States is here. What does that mean? Go ahead.
Well, you grab that.
A little louder. I'm kind of hard of hearing. Plus we got the fan going like crazy.
Yeah, so you entered that into the range that you wanted to show up. It's from the county names you have.
Yeah, that's what it's from. But what does it mean? Why is it here? This is county data, for crying out loud. Why does it say all the United States? Okay, one more shot. Go ahead.
Just aggregated data.
Yeah. There's several aggregate levels here, and so even though this is county level data, if I choose all the United States and look at that particular row, which is row number 2 in my data, I think. Yeah, row number 2. These are the same numbers, but aggregated all the way up to the whole United States. There's also another level of aggregation in here for the state as well. So look, this first one is the state of Alabama, and then we get into the counties for Alabama. And if we scroll down, we'll find the others and so forth. Okay, so recording his credit already. Good for him. All right, so here's what we got to do. Oh, what do you think? So now we've got a way for the user to choose a county, Cherokee, Alabama. I would like to, now remember where we're headed here is for, if it was just to be able to look at Cherokee, it might be enough just to leave the county there. It says Cherokee. We're about to show information for the county of Cherokee. But what if, and we're going this direction, if we're going to have Cherokee compared to its next county over, which is, I don't know, Choctaw County. So I want to be able to show 2, and of course I can only show one of those names in this drop-down box without doing some really weird things. So what should we do with that county name? We got to put that county name somewhere. Any thoughts? Type it out where? Where should we put it? Yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to put it, now here, folks, where we're headed here is we're going to put the data for the selected, I lost my mouse. We're going to put the data for the selected county right next to the labels here. So I'm going to put data right down through here. So I'll have this list of values right down through here. So why don't we go ahead and put the state that we're in here and the county that we're in right here. And then we'll have the values for all of that then right below. Okay, so step 1. We've got to figure out how to get from 12 to putting the name right here. And let's go ahead and put a button on this form to do that with. So this is kind of big. I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller. And again, back on my developer tab, I'm going to come to the toolbox and I'm going to bring on a button. So here's our button. Button controls the very first one. And then I will click and drag to draw that button in here. It's asking for a macro. Haven't made the macro yet, so I'll cancel that. We'll assign the macro here in a minute. But I'm going to change the label on that button just to say show data. So the thought is the user will choose a county, click show data. We'll put the name of the county and the state right here, and then we'll lay in all the values. It's going to take some VBA, so let's do it. I'm just going to start this one from scratch instead of trying to record something, so I'll press Alt F11 to bring up my Visual Basic for Applications editor. And I will insert a module. Insert module. When I say insert module, that gives me what's called a general module. It's a place that I put code that's not dependent on any sheet. It's just a place to put code that executes. All right. Sub, why don't we call it show data. Show data values. All right. So this is the sub-procedure that we're going to execute when the user clicks on that button. So let's first start by saying we got to figure out which row we're going to be dealing with. So we got to bring in values from right here. Incidentally, which row do I need? If the user has given me, let's pick someone up here kind of close to the top. So if the user picks Baldwin, Alabama, the county of Baldwin, Alabama, which row do I need right here for that? Okay, so the kind of the first one that pops up, you might think it's probably number 4, but it turns out 4 is not the right one. So remember that this number is an index to the list of county names. So if I come back here to the county names and I come to number 4, yep, there's Baldwin. But the county identifier for Baldwin is right here, 1003. And so we have to get to the line that has 1003 over here in the data set. And so 1003 is not on line 4, it's on line 5. And in fact, if we were to compare the order of this data, we would see that they're all in exactly the same order. The only difference is there's a header row here that isn't on the other one, and so they're always just offset by 1. And so we don't really have to come back here and look at the county names to find out what the identifier is. We can go straight from this number right here to the row here just by adding 1 to it. So let's start off in our code just by keeping track of that. Let's declare a variable. Dim the row. Or you could dim it Henry David. Why Henry David? Henry David the row. Yeah, I like the row better. We'll go with the row. What type? Full credit for class participation if you can give me the right type. I will accept 2 different answers here.
Integer.
Integer is one of the acceptable answers, full credit. I'll also accept full credit for the other acceptable answer. Long, yeah. In fact, I like long better than integer. And the reason is, even though it's 2 more bytes, I just like to get in the habit of saying, listen, if I'm referring to a row number, I don't want to use integer, why not? Yeah, because I got way more rows than 32,000 rows. I don't have way more rows than 2 billion, and so the long integer type is going to be my preferred type here, even though it's spending an extra 2 bytes. And to me, it's just a habit. It's a reference to a row, the type should be long. Reference to the column, there's only 16,000 columns, so if I'm making a reference to a column, integer is just fine. Now, for this application, integer would be fine for the row because I've got several hundred rows is all of data that I'm looking at. Oh no, several thousand rows of data. So, it's still, I've got 10 times the range that I would otherwise need. So either one would work just fine. Okay, so now let's start off just by recording the row that we're after. And so I'm going to set the row equal to, and I want to make sure that I'm pulling this cell here from A2. So A2 is where the value is. Now I can just come in here and say range A2.value. And that would probably be just fine. But because I have multiple sheets, I've got an A2 on every one of these sheets. And so I would prefer to give it some identifier to the sheet. Why don't we go ahead and do that? And the easiest way is just to give this sheet a better name. So I think we've talked about this before, but there are two names for this worksheet. Comparison is what we have on the tab, but the name we refer to it in code is right here, and I can change that right here on my properties sheet. If that property sheet isn't showing F4, we'll bring it up, or view properties sheet, we'll bring that up. And so I'm gonna call this summary. No, comparison. I'll call it comp, C-O-M-P. And so now that's the name of the sheet, so I'll say comp dot. So I've got a lot of A2s in this workbook, but I'm talking about the A2 that is on the sheet that I've just named as comp. We doing okay with that? All right, and actually I want it to be one more than that, so I'll say that value in that cell plus 1. So now I've got something that's going to keep track of that row. All right, so now I can take that and come to my data set sheet and go right to that row, which is row number 5. This is the one I'm going to try to pull that data from. So let's figure out what I've got to do. I've got to pull the value from column A. I want to put this value right here, and then the next value to the right, I want to go down 1. The next value to the right, I want to go down 1, and so all the way down. Whew. So, any thoughts on how to do that? There's kind of there's two approaches that would work for this. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so I could do something with offset and a loop that would offset horizontally one way and offset vertically the other way. Okay, I like it.
Could just do transpose. I don't know if that's a thing.
Yeah, a paste transpose. You could copy it and do a paste special and transpose the paste. That would work as well. Now here's a little principle I'd like you to kind of start to internalize. And that is that the Windows Clipboard, so when you copy something, the Windows Clipboard is pretty much off limits to you as a programmer. Because when the user puts something on a clipboard, it should be there until the user puts something else on the clipboard. So, imagine you put something on the clipboard, you're doing something here in Excel, you go to paste it, and it pastes something totally different. You have no idea what it was. How did it get there? That'd be pretty upsetting. I'd probably have to dismiss class and go home early if that happened to me. And so even though, we could do it with a copy and a paste transpose, we're going to try to avoid that because we don't want to interrupt the clipboard. Now, if I'm writing this for myself, I'm the only one who's ever going to use it, that's probably okay. But it's a good habit to get into to say, you know what, I should avoid the clipboard when I can. So let's take this approach where we're going to kind of go over a column and down. So let's set up a loop that will do that for me. So I've got the row that I'm keeping track of that. Let me go ahead and dim another one. Dim R as long as well. And let me dim one for the column. Dim C as integer. All right, so we're going to set up a loop, and there are probably better loops to use than the one I'm going to do so far, but we really haven't talked about loops in detail, so we'll continue to use the same one that we've been doing. So the first column that I'm going to look at here is going to be on my data set. I'm starting here in column number 1. So let's start C out at 1. C equals 1. And then the first row that we're going to be printing to is going to be on my comparison sheet is right here. It's going to be row number 3. And so we'll start the row there we'll start R at 3. Now we'll do a do loop. L-O-O-P. And let's use the column to control this. Truth is, we could use either the column or the row to control this. I'm going to use the column. No, I'll use the row. R equals R plus 1. Now, okay, so I've set the structure of the loop up, but I'm going to give it some way to stop. And so we'll put an until clause. Do until we're looking at our comparison sheet, comp.cells, row number R, column number 1, till that value is empty, equal to a zero-length string. Okay, so let's think about what we're doing here. Particular worksheet and a particular cell. The first time through, R is going to be 3, and I'm looking in column 1 on my comparison sheet. Row 3, column 1, let's take a look. So row 3, column 1, that's going to be the cell I'm referring to. Now, I'm going to write to this cell right here, but to control the loop, I want to look right here, because I know that I'm going to have a value for every label. So I'm going to keep moving down until I get to a blank cell, and that's when I know that I'm done. Okay, so let me go ahead and just to test the loop out, I'm going to do a debug.print of that value. And again, the whole purpose here is just, at this point, the only reason I'm printing that is so I can take a look at how this loop is working. Come on, window, dock where I want you. Dock. There we go. Okay, so we haven't used C yet. We're going to use that to pull the values in, but at this point, we should just be able to see that we're iterating across the destination range. Questions about this loop? All right, let's go ahead and run it. We just should see those values. Oh, incidentally, folks, anytime I have a loop and I'm getting ready to run it, it's always a good idea to save just before, because you put yourself into a loop that you can't get out of, you might have to kill Excel. So I'm going to save, and I'll run this. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So it just printed those off. It stopped, so I'm feeling pretty good about it. All right. So now, I don't really want to print those out. What I want to do is I want to set the value of column number 2. So going down row by row, column number 2 is going to equal something. What's it going to equal? Now, it's going to equal some value that I'm reading off of my data sheet. So I've got a data sheet here. It's actually already named data, so that's handy. That's going to equal data dot cells. Now, which row do I want to read the data off of? There's the row, yeah. So I've already set this up. So I've got this variable, the row here. It's already set up to be, that's the row that holds all the data. And so the row that I want here is the row. The column that I want is C. And I want the value from there. Okay, so the first time in this loop, C is 1. So let's just think about that. I'm going to be reading the value from row number 5. And that's what the row is, how we're currently configured, and column number 1. Let's go take a look. Coming over here to my data set, row 5, column 1. It's going to pull this value here, 1003. The label here is ANSI. And it's going to put it right here, starting in, the row that we're starting on. And so that's where that code goes. That's right. And as I go down a row, I need to move over a column. So each time I change my row, I'm going to change my column as well. C equals C plus 1. Whew. So if we think about it, the first time we hit this line, our output row is going to be row 3, and our input column is going to be 1. We're going to increment both of those values. The next time we get here, our output row will be 4, and our input column will be 2. We see it? I think that's it, folks. Save, and I'll run it. And hopefully that put those values for Baldwin County right in here. Looks great. So now I can take a look at Baldwin pretty well. Now I can look at this and go, what was the resident population for April 1st, 2000, the full complete count. Start with the 2000 census. There it is. That's that number. Is there a question over here? How to go to the code. Remember, we've got a TA over here, Cameron, ready to help you with any issues. Right over here. Look up to him longingly. He'll come right over and help.
I was looking for you earlier, but you weren't there.
Where did he go? All right. Now, I do also want to put the county up there. So I've got to pull in the state and the county right here. So let's go ahead and get those. Let's go ahead and get those next. Let's see. So I've got that row. Where am I going to look to find it? Over here on the county names, I should just be able to come to the row. This was, the row -1. And then pull in the name of the county here from column 2 and the state from column 3. That should do the trick. So maybe we'll even, let's do it this way. So before I come here and put the data, I'm going to start by putting in those two labels. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to set the row equal to be just the value that's there in A2 to start. And then right here, I'll use the row to get the county and state information. Then, before I get to this block, I'm going to add 1 to the row to be able to use it below. Does that make sense what I just said? So in this case, when the row is 4, I need that 4 when I'm going to go pull the county name. And so I'm going to start off by just reading the cell, the raw value out of that cell A2. I'll use that to pull in the county and state name. And then when I get to the actual data, I need it to be offset by 1, so I'll offset it here. So I'm going to use row at 1 value, change it, and then use it again. It's a nice thing about a variable is that I can change it as many times as I want to during the running of the code. Okay, so, and I think I'm gonna need this row. Let's see, column number 1, 2. Nope, we're going to just write these O's to those same 2 columns. Okay, so this is going to go to our comp data, our comp sheet. So comp dot comp dot. Oh, why don't we do this one with the range statement? Comp dot range, and this is just going to go in B1. Oops, got to be in quotes. B1 dot value is going to equal something, and then B2 dot value is going to equal something. And we'll go read those values off of my, let's see, what sheet is it? I've got a sheet called county names. So it's called counties. It's already named counties. So that's going to be the sheet counties dot cells. The row I want is the row. The column I want for that first one is column 2. And then the next one is, actually I think I want column 3 for the first one, and then column 2 for the next one. So that would be, the state is in column 3. Let's take a look. Yeah, the state's in column 3. So I'll put the state in B1, and I'll put the county name in B2. Okay, questions here? Let's go ahead and run that and make sure it works okay. In fact, it's probably time to hook this up. Uh-oh. Oh, I'm on the wrong sheet. I want to come to my comparison sheet. Oh, there we go. Baldwin County. It's probably time to hook that code up to our button. So let's hook the code up to the button so you can play with it, and then I'll go back to the code for those of you that are still putting that code in place. Here's how I hook that sub-procedure. Now the procedure is written, I can hook it up to this button. Right-click the button and choose Assign Macro. It'll give you the list of the macros. There's only one. Should be easy to find. And say OK. Click off the button, and now it should be good. Choose a different county, and then bring in the data and it brings that data in. Okay, so here's our code so far. Already, just in the first half hour that we've been doing this, we really have made this a lot more useful. You can actually you can pick a county now and look at the data and make some sense of it. That's pretty good. It took a half hour. Of course, it took a half hour and there's like 90 of us. 45, that's like a week of work here to do. So, okay. Questions here? We're doing okay? What's the next thing to do? Yeah.
I have a question. So when you choose a different county and you enact a macro, it overwrites that column.
So the question is, at this point, when we choose a different county and then run that button, it writes right over the top of that data. That's exactly right.
That we haven't deleted first or anything? Is it caching?
Okay, so the question is it a problem that we haven't deleted this data out of here? And so, that's a good question. Where it might be a problem, so where you might anticipate this being a problem is, well, what happens if for some reason I look over here in my data set and I've got a blank cell? There's no value in that cell. A possibility is that the data values are here, and then when I write the next county in, maybe that other cell's value will still show up. It'll kind of pop into that blank location. And the answer is it will not do that. Because even when there's a blank cell, if we say copy the value from this blank cell over to a different cell, it's going to say, oh, there's nothing here, there's something over here, right over the top of it, and replace it. So the fact that there's not, that I'm writing right over the top of that data without clearing it is okay. There's no risk for accidentally showing the wrong data there. But it brings us up to the point that I want to be able to show more than one county. So what do we have to do to our code to be able to let it show more than one county? Any thoughts? Give us some thoughts. There's a couple of different approaches here. Go ahead. Over here, we've got 3 in a row. Take your pick.
Is there like a command we could do, just move over one column?
So what do you mean just move over one column?
Is there like some we could do until like 4?
Move what over one column?
Like our first sheet, our comparison sheet.
Okay, you were talking about one of the 2 ways, but I can't tell which way you're talking about.
So you could like start and you want to kind of cross the row, and if there are already like 5, because of the details, so you end up with
Okay,
a blank one.
so this is one of the approaches, and that is to say, listen, let's start right here and let's find out we'll do something to find out what the first blank column is. So look here, and if it's blank, use it. If not, look here. Kind of keep looking until we find a blank column. Is that what you had in mind?
Kind of.
Something like that, okay. It turns out that would work beautifully. It's harder than the other way. Anyone want to take a guess at the other way?
Maybe at the end of the loop, insert or when you click show data, insert your row and B, and paste it.
You said insert a row and B, you meant insert a column, and that's exactly right. 'Cause look, when I click on this button, it's already set up to write that data right here. And in fact, there's a pretty good argument that says the most recent one I've shown is probably the one I'd like to have closest to the labels anyway. And so all I would have to do is say, you know what, let's just insert a column right here. It's kind of a wide column. Insert a column right there, and then my code's ready to write the next one right in here. In fact, if I do it by hand, I'm now ready to kind of pull in the next county, and we're ready to go. So it's really just one statement that says, hey, you click that button, insert a column. What if there's no data there? I mean, what if there's no data there? Do we have to worry about inserting a column? No, big deal, there's nothing there. So insert a column, it's going to move nothing over. I'm okay with that. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's make that the very first thing that we do. And so all we're going to say is we want column B. There's several ways to get to that column. One is if I'm referring to a particular cell, I can say dot entire column. E-N-T-I-R-E-C-O. So range, particular range here, B1, dot entire column. This will give me a reference to that whole column. And then I could say dot insert. Folks, if I didn't know that the insert command was what inserted a column, what should I do? Yeah, record myself inserting that, and I would find out it goes, oh, active cell dot entire column dot insert. I got it. So that's one way. Let me show you an alternate way to refer to that that's probably a little cleaner. And that is, on my comparison sheet, instead of saying range, I'll say columns. Which column do I want? Column 2. I don't have to say entire column because I'm talking about the entire column. So that's another approach. Either of these two lines will do the same thing. It's going to insert a column right there. That was one line. We had one line of code. Oh, we got to do one more thing. And it's just because when we do that insert, it picks up the width of the column from the column to the left. We don't really want it to be that long, or that wide. And so, let's go ahead and record ourselves doing this one. Even though I know, deep down, I know the command. But let's go ahead and go through the recording process. So what I want to do this. I want to do whatever happens when the user double clicks the divider between the column headings and just resizes that to the size of the data. I don't even have any idea what that might be called. What's that? Wrap text? No, you're guessing. It's not even close. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, there's something like that. But the whole point is we don't know. I'm trying to establish the fact that we don't know. You might know, but we, meaning you and me, we don't know. Okay. So I'm just going to turn on my recorder. What should I name this macro? The macro name that I was hoping for was macro 1, and it came up. It was just, it's exactly the one I want. Why is that the one I want? It doesn't matter. I'm just going to look at what it generated. I'm going to go, oh, okay, that's what I got to write, and I'm going to throw that macro away. I don't feel too bad about throwing macros away. I can create them left and right. It's not wasteful. Throw it away. Record that. I'm just going to double click that. Oh. Darn it. Okay. I don't know if it actually would record the auto size if it was already auto sized. So anyway, there we go. Stop recording. I'll probably record more than I needed to. But let's go take a look at it. Now remember that when you start recording a macro, that each time you have each time you've opened Excel and you say I'm recording macros, it'll make a new module to put that in. So even though we already had a module, we're going to come look in module 2 to find that. Yeah, an auto fit is exactly right. And so that's what we needed. It seems this is a little overkill. Columns B colon B. What does B colon B mean? It means the whole column. And then from there we said, you know what? With that whole column we want the entire column. And then we're going to auto fit it. But that's the key right there. That's what we needed, auto fit. And so I'm going to come back to my module 1. And I don't want to auto fit it right after I insert it because there's no data there to auto fit it to. But I'm going to go ahead and auto fit it right after I put all the data in. So at the very bottom. Comp dot columns 2 dot auto fit. Save. And now I should be humming now. We've got a lot of Franklin going on there. All right, it's gorgeous. Let me go back to the code so you can get caught up if you have questions. All right, any questions on what we've done so far? How many of you are going, wow, this is pretty easy? Yeah, you can follow this through step by step. How many of you are going, oh my gosh, this is a nightmare? Could be there too. All right, it's okay to be there. Hopefully you won't still be there by the time we get to the midterm. All right, so, yeah, I mean, look, just looking at this, if we try to take this all in at once, it seems like a lot, but kind of going through it step by step, it's not too bad. Here's one more thing I'd like to do. It's pretty clear that we can assign a macro to this button, but I can assign a macro to any shape that I put on the form, or that I put here on the sheet. including this one. Watch this. I'm going to go ahead and select this one, and I'm going to assign a macro to my combo box. Not macro 1. I'm going to delete that here shortly. Put it here, my data validation. And you might wonder, well, when does it, I mean, you get it. It's a button. It's going to run the macro when I click it. So what's going to cause this to run the macro? Is it when I click it? It's not when I click it. It's not when I select it. It's when it gets updated. And so now, all I have to do is choose it, and bingo, it puts the data right. I don't have to click the show button. Bam, it goes in. Wow. I'm feeling smart. Yeah, so no extra code, just assigning the macro to that button. This button is now, kind of extra, no longer needed. Yeah.
I don't know if you're going to cover this, but is there any type of button rather than the drop down that we have to scroll up and down? Can we just turn it into a type in a column?
One where you just type it in. So the hope is there some way for us to just type this in and have it go there?
Well, like when you type it in and then it pulls up the drop down. It's kind of like when you're on the internet and asks like what country you're in. You start typing
You start typing and it fills in for you.
Yeah.
You type S and it puts all the S's. Yeah, I'm not going to cover that. Turns out there's another command. There's another combo box down here. You've got this set called Form Controls, and this set called Activex Controls. The Activex Controls generally don't quite look as clean, but they're way more powerful. And perhaps the Activex combo box would do that for me. I'm not sure. But the answer is that's not for today. Other questions that I can dodge? I'm slippery that way. I'm not going to answer. All right, well here, why don't we go ahead then and let's change this. Should we change this button or should we make another button? I'd like to have one that just kind of clears all of my data off. So let's leave this one in place and bring another button on. Let's make the procedure first, then we'll bring the button on. So back to my code. I've got this sub-procedure here for show data values. And we'll make another one to clear the data. Sub clear data. Maybe I'll put a comment on this one. I'm feeling happy. Delete all county data from the comparison sheet. Alrighty then. So the question is, how are we going to do it? So give me an approach. What's a good way? If I was doing this by hand, how would I delete it? Yeah.
You could just do Control-Shift right, Control-Shift down, and select all the way up to.
Okay, so what you're saying is hold the shift and the control key, hit the down arrow, that moves me to the end of the contiguous data, and then hit the right arrow, and that selects that set of data. That will work beautifully as long as there's not a blank value in here. If I've got a blank value in here, I'm going to, because that Control-Shift down arrow would stop at that first blank row. It turns out I know enough about this data to know there's no blank values. So this one will be pretty good. But let's talk about some other approaches.
Just highlight the columns.
So another approach is to highlight the columns. Now what I like about this approach is that it doesn't matter what is in the, it doesn't matter whether there's any spaces this is going to work. What I dislike about this one is that I got to somehow figure out how far over to go. It takes my mind to know when to stop here. Whereas if I'm right here, I could just hold down, that, hit down, over. I don't have to think about it. So the nice thing about the first approach is I don't have to think about where to stop. Nice thing about the second approach is I don't have to worry about whether there's a blank column or any blank cells. Go ahead.
What about Control-Shift-N?
Control-Shift-End. Uh-oh. Control-Shift-End. That's beautiful. That like solves all the problems. I don't know how to say Control-Shift-N. What should I do? I don't even know what it looks like when you say Control. Let's record it. Record macro. Wait, don't record it yet. Cancel. Go back over the top. Record macro. There's already something I don't like about Control-Shift-N, but let's see what it records as. And I'll call it macro 2. That's great. Control-Shift-End. Stop recording. Take a look at the code. This says I'm going to have a range that starts at my selected cell. Oh, this is we're going to use the syntax here in just a minute. So this is a range where I specify 2 cells. I'm going to define a range, not by giving it a string, like A1 or something, but I'm going to start off by saying, here's a range, give me the upper left-hand corner of the range, comma, the lower right-hand corner of the range, and that's going to define the range. And the way they've defined this range is by saying, from the active cell, look at the set of special cells and refer to the last cell. And so that's what control end would do. It finds the last cell in the used range. So this would be pretty good if I was really sure that there was not some other data out there somewhere. And so the first 2 approaches do a little bit more to limit it just to the data that I'm working with. And we'll pick one of those. Unless someone else has another way they want to talk about it. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you just do a do until loop where it goes to cell B1 and if it's not empty, it deletes the column?
Okay, so the thought is we could make a loop that starts here and says, hey, is this empty? Just look right here. Is this empty? Not empty, delete the column. Is it empty? Not empty, delete the column. And then these will just kind of continue to come, that will chew them off one at a time. Not a bad way either. That'd be a pretty good way as well. So that would be a way where I don't really have to think about it. I can just kind of keep executing it until it's empty. Yeah, I like that approach too. But because I don't want to talk so much about the loop, I want to talk about some different ways to refer to ranges. We're going to take the first approach. There's one more comment back here.
I was just going to say different way, but it's fine.
Okay, so all of those approaches they're fine approaches, and they would all work well. Let's choose that first one. So the first one was, oops, need some more data. So the first one was just come here to B1, Control-Shift down arrow, Control-Shift over. Let's record ourselves doing that to see what it records. Record macro, that's fine. Control-Shift down over, and stop recording. And here's the magical part. So a range has a method called end. And end just allows me to move to the end of the contiguous data, the same way that holding the control key down and pressing the arrow, either up, down, left, or right, will do it. Now, why is it called end? It turns out that back in the olden days, before they invented the control key, the way you did that was with a 2-keystroke sequence. It still works. I want to go to the bottom of cell of the contiguous data in cell C. I tap the end key on my keyboard, tapped it, and now I hit the down arrow key, and it takes me right down there. If I'm holding the shift key down when I do that, and up arrow, it does the same thing. Was it really before they invented the control key? No, the control key was around before Excel was ever born. But it was before we were doing control down arrow to make that selection. Go ahead.
There could be a problem if you use like Alabama as a whole. There's nothing in B1. Control shift.
Hey, that's a really good idea. Let's find out. So what you're saying is that if there's nothing here, and we do control, shift, down arrow, oops, I hit down and left at the same time, fat finger. Down arrow, it only goes 1. Yikes. There is a blank cell problem. Go ahead.
Why don't we just do Control Shift right and then say select the entire column and then?
The question is, why don't we just do Control Shift right and then select the entire problem, because we could have the same thing as well. Let's see the problem. The problem is if we're looking at the whole, if we're looking at the whole state of something. Georgia, Idaho. How did I get to Idaho so fast? There we go. Idaho State. So the problem is that if I start right here and go control right arrow, whoops, it stops at the end of the contiguous data. Kind of the same problem. That's okay. We'll still get there. We'll use the same approach with a slightly different way of doing it, but you'll still like it. Okay. And we'll still use the same thing, using this end method to find the cells that we want. All right. So here's clear data. This is what we want to do. So we're going to come here to clear data, and we're going to define the range that we want. So we got to get to the range. So here's the syntax, range. I'm going to go ahead and put the quotes, the parentheses in, the comma, and that's just going to let me know that I'm going to try to find that. And then once I've found that, I'm going to do something with it. What am I going to do? I want that range. I want to just clear the range. I think clearing the range should be okay. So I now have to put a reference to a cell here and a reference to a cell here. Now, the reference for the cell to start is always going to be B1. That's pretty easy, but I'm going to actually put in here range B1. And I probably want that on my comp sheet. The question is, why do I have to put the range here? You used to have to put the range here. So could we just do it as a string? You might be able to just do it as a string, but I'm putting the range here because I want to drive home the fact that this takes a range argument. I can put a range right here. Even if I might be able to do it with a string. I'm just not sure about that. Let me just try it. So the question is, what happens if I say range B1, comma, B5 dot select? Back in the early days, this would not have worked. It might work now. Yeah, that works okay. But the point is that this can take a cell, a reference to a cell or another range. So I could say I want from the active cell over here to B5, and that will operate as well. So why don't we just go ahead and do them both? So I like it. Let's go ahead and just back this down to, well, somehow I have to be sure to tell it that the range I'm talking about is on the comp sheet. So I'm going to leave it this way. I could specify that in a string, but let's go ahead and do it this way. So that's that first cell. Now I want to do something that's going to get me to the last cell in this range. And here's the way I'm going to do it. To be able to defeat the problem of having a blank cell here in column, in the first row, I'm going to come to this cell right here. The cell that's all the way at the very bottom of my data. Holy cow, why do I only have 65,536 cells, or rows? It's an XLS workbook. If I wanted to get my full 1.02 million, I got to already be saved as an XLSM, which I'm saved as that, but apparently I opened it in compatibility mode, and we're still in compatibility mode. That's okay. But I want to refer to this particular cell, and then from there, I want to move up. And that will get me to that cell there, and from there, I'll do a control right to find that last cell. So this is the one I'm trying to get to. So by starting at the very bottom, coming up until I hit data, and then moving over, that will get me to that range. Yep?
So you're still not going to run into an issue if one of those last cells is blank?
The question is, would I run into an issue if one of these last cells was blank? And the answer is yes, none of them are blank, but you're right, we can do better because we can do it. We can start over here in column A. So if I'm all the way down here and come up, I'm not doing anything with this cell itself. I'm just getting there so I can write arrow over. And if we had blank cells, that would still be a problem. But there are no blank cells. In the data, there's no blank cells. So let me get an expression that's going to get to that particular cell. Is there a question?
Just say if there is a concern about that, you could add that to that micro just to put like an X or something on the very bottom.
It could do something to fill in a value there so we know that it would work. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So first, let's look at the expression that would get to that cell. Here we go. Question mark. Comp dot cells. Which cell do I want? I want which row do I want for this? The one that's at the very bottom. How do I tell what's at the very bottom? When you're just beginning, you're tempted to say, I don't know, just pick 5,000. That's low enough. Go down to 5,000 and come up, but don't do that. Go to the very last one. Here's how we do it. Rows.count. I can ask how many rows there are. And depending on the way the worksheet's open, that number is going to be different. I definitely don't want to try to hit 1,000,000 rows in a compatibility worksheet. And so I can take that expression right there, and I can drop that right in here. And so that's going to be the same as putting 65,536 right here. That's the last row. Which column do I want? Column number 1. From that, it's all the way down there at the bottom. From there, I want to say end XLUP. And that will bring me up to that particular cell. And right now, just while we're here in debug mode, I'm going to just print the address so I can see it. Yeah, that's A85. That looks pretty good. So that gets me to that cell. Now, I'm now referring to cell A85. I haven't selected it. I've just referred to it. And from here, I want to hit Control right arrow. So I can just say dot end XL to right. Why is it XL up but XL to right? I have no good reason for that. But that's the way it is. How would you know that? Record yourself doing it and you'd see it. And so that is going to refer to that cell. I'm just print the address off here. Sure enough, that got me to J85. So I don't need the address. I want just up to the part that refers to the cell. And that's the end cell in this data. Whew, kind of an ugly looking line. So I'm going to have a range that starts on my comp sheet in range B1 and ends at where I would be if I went to the bottom, came up, and then over. And then once I've got that, I want to clear it. Let me run that and see if it clears. Come up and take a look at the data. Run that, and sure enough, it blew that data away. So I'm feeling pretty good about it. Let me go ahead and put in a button to clear to be the clear data. I've got show data. I'll move this one over. You can select a button once you're working on it by holding the control key down. And now I'll insert another one. Developer tab, toolbox, insert a button. Which do you want to put? Clear data is the one I want. And some label, remove data. And I should be sitting pretty.
Let's see the
Back to the code. Do you want that highlighted? That's just that second argument. Okay, folks, what questions do you have? None? Okay then. It's pretty uncharacteristic of me for me to dismiss class 5 minutes early, but I'm not opposed to doing it. If there's nothing else, class dismissed.
Can you scroll down just a tiny bit? Show that the other cell
And we got all the code up on the screen.
Oh, that's all?
Yep.